Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for joining me. You have done such important work lately calling out all of this corruption in the Trump administration. But one example that we find actually with one of your colleagues in Congress, Marjorie Greene, we talked about this on the channel, after becoming the chairwoman of the DOJ subcommittee, decided maybe I'll buy myself some Tesla stock for the first time since 2021. So this wasn't just in the string of regular purchases, bought a couple tens of thousands of dollars. Now, I don't think that that's a great thing to be doing when you're working directly alongside Elon Musk, making sure that everything going on with his companies is A-okay, which it's not. But what are you doing? Because I've heard about a new piece of legislation you've introduced, the Drain the Swamp Act. What are you doing that would combat actions like that for members of Congress?
Well, I have a five-part political reform plan, and one of them is ban members of Congress from trading stock. It's pretty simple. There's the Trust Act that does that. But the Drain the Swamp Act is to call out the hypocrisy of some in MAGA, because what it says is that White House officials shouldn't be getting gifts from lobbyists. And the reality is Biden had that as an executive order. The first thing Trump does is he comes and he repeals it. And so I said, MAGA, come join me. Let's make sure that no White House official can get gifts from lobbyists, either under Trump or any future president.
Well, they talk about this all the time and then turn around and, you see these Trump crypto scandals. And do you think that, of course, alongside calling it out, making sure that we have to stop it, someone like Marjorie Greene, those actions, do we need to be investigating those in this Congress?
Well, we don't have any power, but what we need to do, we just don't have the oversight power. What we need to do is to run on a clear reform agenda, to be clearly bold in what we would do legislatively if we have power. And that means banning stock trading, it means banning PAC money, it means banning lobbyist money, it means banning members of Congress from becoming lobbyists, and to say that the American people, they've been talking about draining the swamp for decades. I mean, Donald Trump borrowed that from Nancy Pelosi. She ran on draining the swamp in 2016. So we've got to be the anti-corruption party.
And we haven't seen much of that from them. Actually, I'd say we'd see the opposite. We talk about the promises that Donald Trump has broken, but he hasn't just gone as far as breaking them. He took an extra step. He's not just breaking promises, but he said, we're going to get your grocery prices lower. He hasn't done that. They're actually up. He said he's going to battle corruption. We've seen more corruption in Washington than ever in this Trump administration. And Republicans, their own voters, even in these deep red districts, are letting them have it. We just got new reporting that the NRCC has decided that they are canceling these in-person town halls after a week of getting booed. It was a little bit too much of them. I heard that you're actually deciding that you're going to fill those shoes of Republicans who are too scared to talk to their voters. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, I'm going to be going on March 24th to 3 districts in California that are red. One of them, the district, has 2/3 of people on Medicaid. And the Republican budget cuts Medicaid by $880 billion. That means people who are on Medi-Cal are not going to be able to be covered. Hospitals are going to close. I want to talk to people in my state, in these red areas, about what's happening and have them stand up for their own benefits, for their own rights.
Yeah, and what have you been hearing about Trump 2.0? Obviously, we see these big cuts to Medicaid coming in this House Republican budget, but what are you hearing that's maybe different about Trump 1.0, or that people weren't expecting and are really scared about? What is really galvanizing people that's different in this administration than maybe even the last, or what Republicans did in the last Congress?
Well, he's doing so much damage to the working and middle class. Look, there are 3 simple points. He's firing veterans. 30% of federal workers are veterans. He's firing people who went to Iraq and Afghanistan. That's why they're stopping doing these town halls. The veterans are showing up upset. He's cutting Medicaid. That means a lot of people whose grandparents are in elder care, who have seniors who need health care, who have children on health care, are going to be cut, and in rural communities. And then he's wreaking havoc with the economy by these tariffs. I mean, he's putting higher prices on all the groceries, all the avocados, the tomatoes, the vegetables that come from Mexico. And by the way, Latinos are turning on him. I mean, Latinos voted for him, but they're now saying, look, a lot of our grocery stores or small businesses are hurting. I mean, they do business with Mexico. I mean, it is just he's taking a wrecking ball to the working and middle class.
Yeah, both him and Elon Musk and you and I have talked a lot about DOJ, about how Democrats do want to battle, as you are with the Drain the Swamp Act. We do want to battle corruption, and at the same time, of course, we want to battle waste, fraud, and abuse in government, but they don't really seem to care about that. That has been the most consistent lie that's being told. One, that they care about cutting that waste, but also that these are really high-level minds that Donald Trump has working in his administration. This is something that I talk a lot about on my show. My viewers know that, like, I want to make sure that people know that Elon Musk does not know what he's doing with regards to cutting waste in government. Of course, that's not what he actually wants to do, but the people working around him, they're going through whatever computer program it is, they're hitting Control F and just mass deleting. They are doing this without any empathy. It's the reason people are responding, and of course, that's a lie we have to call out. And we're expecting a lot of them later tonight. You will be attending Donald Trump's joint address to Congress. What are you expecting him to say? But much more importantly, what are you expecting him to lie about that we need to call out in advance and then, of course, after as well?
Well, I have as my guest Carlos Espina, who's got millions of followers in the Latino community. And one of the things he's going to lie about is saying that he's just deporting criminals. I mean, a lot of people in the Latino community said, fine, deport the criminals, but he's deporting people who are law-abiding, who are paying taxes, who are small business owners. And that's why I wanted to have Carlos here to really talk about what's going on. He's going to lie about the impact these tariffs are having on the economy. He's going to say, oh, they're protecting jobs. They're not protecting jobs. They're not protecting manufacturing jobs. They're hurting jobs. They're hurting the small business owners. He's going to lie about the cuts. I mean, I don't think he's going to be honest that they're taking away people's Medicaid. These are a lot of his voters. Unfortunately, he won voters under $100,000. Those are the folks who rely on Medicaid. He's going to lie about who's being fired. 30% of people who are being fired are veterans. But you're absolutely right. He surrounded himself not with an extraordinary team, with a lot of people who are incompetent. And you look at presidents who are transformative. Lincoln, FDR, Reagan, who I disagreed with, they have very competent people for their ideology around them. And that's ultimately Trump's downfall, is he does not have a competent team. And that's why he's ultimately going to end up betraying the very people who voted for him. Now, I don't think Democrats should take some kind of gloating attitude or glee on this. What we have to say is we screwed up too. We let down the working and middle class in this country. NAFTA, the World Trade Organization with China as ascension into it, the financialization of the economy. We ignored a lot of the economic issues. We're going to now have a real transformative vision: Medicare for all, free vocational education, free public college, taxing wealth, making sure we're having a moonshot for manufacturing, and that we're going to rebuild this country.
Yeah, and I think the very individualized, hyper-local examples are so important. You and I have had this conversation so much about how we break through to the people who bump into their politics, who aren't seeking it out. And the doge of it all really worries me on that, right? Because when people hear, oh, the government, there's so much waste, this is things that people generally believe. And of course, there is waste in government. And so it was my great concern that what people would hear wouldn't be about the veterans who are losing their jobs, wouldn't be worried about the cancer and the Alzheimer's research that's cut, but they just hear government waste is being cut. But what I think Democrats have done really successfully is focus on these hyper-local examples in their communities. What are some of those that you see in your district? What are the overwhelming stories that you continue to hear about the very specific examples of people impacted who we have to lift up?
Well, there are veterans, someone who went to Iraq and Afghanistan who's helping veterans with mental health issues. He was fired without any notice. There's someone who was helping farmers be able to get loans to be able to sell their products. That person was fired, and his family is expecting a baby. There's a scientist who I talked to yesterday who does work on cancer research, being fired. So these are not just paper pushers. These are people who are helping our veterans. These are people who are curing disease. These are people who are making sure we have clean water and clean air, and they're getting a sledgehammer to them.
Yeah, and this is what I talk about when I'm saying, like, these mass firings, they are intentional in the way that we saw Russ Vought say that he wants federal workers, when they come into the office every day, to feel traumatized by it, right? So that's the intention. But they're not intentional or smart in the way they're doing it, right? These probationary workers that they're firing because they don't have the certain civil service protections that people who have worked in the government for more than a year have. But it's not just a year of government work, right? It's a year in whatever agency that you're in. So people who are moving around are going to be fired even if they've been in the government for 20, 30 years and are experts in their field. It's this attack on expertise that we continue to see. We obviously have to keep talking about it more. You have been everywhere, all the time and always. I always say this when you're on my show. What are the places, the platforms, where are you going to be speaking and sharing the message, combating what Trump says tonight after we see this joint address? Where are you going to be going?
Well, I'm doing a pre-rebuttal right here.
I like it.
We're going to be doing with content creators and influencers a 10-minute session, and then I'm going to be on News Nation. I'm going to be on Fox News. I'm going on with Dr. Phil on a town hall with Jen. You got to be everywhere.
You got to be everywhere. And you continue to do the thing that I really love, which is go to the spaces where we are never heard. You're going on podcasts. You're going on the right-wing shows. You're on Fox a lot. I think the podcasts are the most important.
I agree.
You went on the PVD podcast.
I did.
You went on Tim Pool.
Yeah.
These are places that just Democrats don't even think of.
Yeah.
What has been your takeaway of what, I don't want to say what we can learn from these folks, which honestly, we can. They do have a great grasp over their section of the media.
Yeah.
But what are you learning about the talking points that Republicans are presenting to their voters, the lies that they're telling? Like, what are you consistently hearing from these influencers in that space that you identify and say, okay, this is the misinformation that's being pushed to voters. We got to combat it that way. Like, what's your consistent takeaway from those back and forths?
I think they choose to emphasize different parts of reality. I'll give you an example with the pardons on January 6th. We talk about, understandably, the people who were hitting and committing violence against police officers and the people who committed property destruction. They talk about the few cases of people who were charged on a misdemeanor who just walked into the Capitol, didn't do anything in terms of violence. And they talk about those stories and the sympathy there. So I think what going on these podcasts makes you realize is what are the story that they're telling their voters, and how do we ultimately, as Americans, come together on certain principles. They're recognizing that working in a class and middle class Americans have been shafted, recognizing that we do need to become a manufacturing superpower again, recognizing that we have to treat people with respect and listen about difference, and that not everything that someone else thinks is because they're fed with misinformation. It could be that they just have a different perspective, and then we have to recognize that and not come with an intellectual or moral condescension in how we approach other voters. I think too often our party thinks, well, if they think that may be because that must be because they're stupid, or that must be because they were fed lies. No, it just could be that they have a different point of view, and we've become too insular as a party. Going on to these podcasts forces you to engage in free speech and to learn that you may have ideas that could be wrong, and to learn that you don't have a monopoly on the truth.
Well, you bring up condescension, and you always give so much time to this show, so I got one more question for you, and I really appreciate it. You bring up condescension, people speaking down to someone, and it made me think of J.D. Vance, right? Someone who you've gone back and forth with on Twitter, unfortunately, our vice president, and what he had to say to President Zelensky on Friday, just demanding a thank you, which we have seen countless times from President Zelensky, not just to Donald Trump, not just to President Biden, but really he always makes the point of saying thank you to the American people who are in this fight with him. What do you have to say to J.D. Vance? Like, what was your gut check reaction to that?
I was like, you don't have to try to own the libs when you're talking to world leaders. I mean, look, J.D. Vance said, well, what about diplomacy? And Zelensky said, we tried the diplomacy, it didn't work. In 2019, we had a ceasefire, Putin broke it. Vance could have come back and said, okay, I acknowledge that Putin broke it, but we still have an ongoing war. How are we going to bring this war to an end? We need some diplomacy to try to bring the war to an end in a just peace. But instead of engaging on the merits, instead of actually having a conversation, he said, okay, I'm going to try to embarrass Zelensky and own the libs. And I get that may work in certain form of domestic politics, but you're representing the United States on the world stage. You know, grow into the role. I don't wish his embarrassment as an American. I felt embarrassed, and I don't think he's going to win in the future, but I want him to at least represent the country well. And it was just unsettling to see that, because I said that's a reflection on all of us as Americans.
It really is. Well, J.D. Vance is not doing us proud, but you certainly are. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I always appreciate it.
Thank you.